There are two highly successful horror movies about a witch in the woods. One is set in New England in the 1630s, the other is set in Maryland in the 1990s, told through found footage, and both depict ordinary characters confronted by a terrifying evil. Will they ultimately submit to it, or will they rail against it? The comparison goes deeper than you will think. Welcome to The Witch versus the Blair Witch Project. My name's Thomas Thorogood, and I'm joined by someone with a strong connection to both of these movies. Avellina, welcome to the channel.
Thanks so much, Thomas. I really appreciate being on.
What's your personal connection to both of these movies?
Well, when it comes to the first film, The Witch, I take a great interest in Anglo-American history in general. They did try in a lot of ways to tap into the actual literature of 17th century Puritans, and I appreciated that, although I also saw that it had certain areas that lacked, I think, with certain modern biases. And when it comes to the Blair Witch Project, I am a Marylander, so it's something of a cult classic in my state, and there are various things it's hard not to notice as a Marylander, even just little things about the woods or about the town that they go into, the people that they interview, the places they end up shopping, and the window decorations around Halloween. Just these little things that feel very recognizable to my lived experience in Maryland.
Yeah, and that idea of a witch in the woods is quite timeless, isn't it? It goes back to Hansel and Gretel and those sorts of fairy tales, but also potentially a lot further. But we picked out these two films because they are probably the biggest witch in the wood horror movies. Should we start with The Witch? We'll start with the one that's set further back in time. And our first clip is when Caleb has just visited the witch in the woods and he's returned and he seems to be possessed.
Oh yea, though I should walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me.
Cast the light of countenance upon me. Spread over me the lap of thy love. Wash me in the ever-flowing fountains of thy blood. Holy thine I am, my sweet Lord Jesus. My Lord, my love, kiss me with the kisses of thy mouth. How lovely art thou. Thy embrace, my Lord, my Lord, my love, my soul's salvation. Take me to thy lap.
There's a part of me that really likes the scene and a part of me that senses that Eggers is doing something a bit voyeuristic. So the part of me that likes it is the fact that the people that actually put this together got it quite accurate in terms of the kind of bridal mysticism language that the Puritans and the Covenanters really adored. There's a tendency in modern culture to view the Puritans as these extremely straight-laced people who don't have, these depths of emotion in them or ability to speak, in many cases, very rapturously about Christ in terms of this biblical bridal language, the Song of Songs and so forth. And that is simply not the case. You look at Lord Brooke from the English Civil War, or you look at Samuel Rutherford from among the Covenanters, truly beautiful language being used by them, very similar to this. Here's an example from Lord Brooke. He who refresheth with the sweet odors, pleased with the various comely shapes of a flower, can say, this is sweet, this is lovely, lovely indeed. Yet Jesu Christ is a bed of spices, as the lily of the field, the rose of Sharon, sweeter, much sweeter, 10,000 times more lovely. This man knoweth God, this man loveth God, this man knoweth him indeed, and this knowledge, as it is the most pleasant here, so it will certainly prove the most profitable hereafter, and always declare itself most real. I affirm confidently, and I hope truly, that he who soars upon the wings of affection and layeth himself in the arms of Jesu Christ, though he amuse not his head with the mystical nature of the Trinity, with the procession of the spirits, with the incarnation of Jesus Christ, attempting to make that holy oil, touching the ark, this glory which is too high for him, losing himself while he laboreth to see how human nature can be raised so high, divine condescends so low as to bring forth the hypostatical union. I say such a one knoweth more of God than the other. So in brief on that, it's him both using that kind of mystical language in description of Christ and also saying that it is a being giving oneself over in that rapturous devotion, that rapturous love of Christ, which is greater than simply trying to understand with the mind these great mysteries such as the hypostatic union and things of that nature. He's not trying to say, just for clarity, because some people could misinterpret that, he's not trying to say those things are not important in Christology, but he is certainly saying that to a greater extent it is in the heart. It is in the heart that these things matter. And I feel like, unfortunately, the movie used the language in a way that was intended to be strange and even off-putting to the modern ear, so that our tendency would be to think of it sexually, and our tendency would be to think of it in a way that was perverse, quite frankly. The way that this was set up, it has a voyeuristic feel. And I know that they were potentially plot-wise trying to play with, well, you know, is he delivered or is he still under the possession of the witch? But there really is a sense that why they were using that type of language is they were leaning on it because they knew that most modern audiences would find it strange. And so they were trying to, and I find Eggers does this a bit. He's a bit usury with regards to history. He uses it when he wants to in order to subvert the actual content that he's using.
Fascinating. Yeah, because we were just looking up here that people reckon this is a quote from a diary entry by Winthrop.
Who's one of the Puritans, yes.
And you're suggesting that it's maybe kind of cynically using this mystical Christian writing to convey a sense that something is still off with Caleb here. Because
they know that most moderns aren't used to it. I feel like that's why it's sort of like, oh, it's going to come off weird to them. It's going to come off sexual.
Right. So. Yeah. Maybe one thing that it gets perhaps more right is the sense in which Calvinistic theology would have played a role for these characters and the concern about, are we in the elect or the reprobate? I've just got here actually a diagram that you've probably seen before.
Oh, wow.
William Perkins. So he was a Puritan who lived 1558 to 1602. And it's quite fascinating because he's sort of tried to map out how salvation works. So he puts God, he's kind of remembered that God is triune at the top.
Yeah.
And then he has, predestination, creation, the fall of Adam, and then splitting into those who are saved and those who aren't. But he has to account for the fact that some people appear to be saved but aren't actually, and some people appear not to be saved but are actually.
The most well-intentioned Calvinists in the world could tie themselves into a lot of knots over this kind of thing and have struggled oftentimes to figure out who is saved and who isn't and so forth.
And I wonder if you see that in this next clip where they're kind of grappling with Caleb's fate, and because of this evil that's confronting them in the woods, they're genuinely beginning to wonder, well, are we saved or are we damned as a family?
My son is dead. Damned!
Caleb did what cry Jesus.
The devil!
Thou know it not.
The devil will speak to scripture too.
Thou know it not. It's not true.
We are damned.
Wait!
I'll give the movie credit with this. They could have made the dad into the villain of the piece, just sort of bad Puritan dad, bad patriarchy figure, they didn't really. I mean, he's flawed, but he really loves his family. And I thought it was quite well done, really, the scene with regards to them questioning what happened to the baby.
He had disappeared, not 1 week past, yet you and mother utter not his name.
He is gone, Caleb.
Tell me.
Tell thee what?
Is he an hell?
Caleb, look you. I love thee marvellous well. But 'tis God alone, not man, what knows who is the son of Abraham and who is not, who is good and who is evil.
But I thought that actually the movie did do a very good job of accurately depicting the struggle that a loving father would have to think about that, and also a sensitive boy in the case of Caleb. So it's very heart-wrenching that way. I think that the elements of family drama in that sense were quite well done in the film.
Yeah, and some people don't consider the film to be a tragedy overall. It'd be interesting to talk about that. But if we move on to Thomasin's fate, she is the character in the family who ultimately submits to the evil of the witch and kind of joins the coven.
What dost thou want?
Butter.
What canst thou give?
Wouldst thou like the taste of butter?
So specific.
A pretty
Very.
dress? Wouldst thou like to live deliciously?
Yes.
Wouldst thou like to see the world?
What will you from me?
Dost thou see a book before thee? Remove thy shift.
I cannot write my name.
I will guide thy hand.
We used to quote that at uni, like on the way to dinner and stuff. Wouldst thou like to
You gotta
live
wonder when
deliciously?
watching this. I mean, did she ever get her pretty dress, her butter? I remember the one scene that she's like, I miss the glass windows in England.
We had glass windows in England. We haven't been hither so long, you can forget that.
As you like, Thomasin.
You got mad. Dost not remember Fowler laying on the floor in the sun? Remember once he lay upon the table, and father saw him and he said, "We will have him for meat. Kate, we will roast this beast."
I remember that day, but no glass.
Well, it was pretty.
And I'm like, did she get her glass window? And I'm like, all I'm getting from this is, all right, she's pimping herself to this, goat guy. And is naked in a New England forest. That doesn't sound like a good life at all. I'm just yeah, this just doesn't sound like a good thing to sell your soul for. Like, not even on like a really basic deal making level.
Yeah, it's playing very much to kind of sensual, materialistic delights, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, see, that's the thing. We've talked about this before in our private conversations, but I get the impression that Eggers and A24 in general is oversexed. It really is. And so there's this certain thing that everything kind of goes back to sex. Like, sex, it's this sort of like all roads lead to Rome problem. And it's like all roads lead to something sexual. It can't almost be anything else. It all must kind of become this sort of weird sex fantasy. So whether it's using the language of bridal mysticism that was common among the Puritans and the Covenanters, or whether it's this kind of thing like a sexual awakening moment. As we know, there are people out there who really interpret it that way. And make it like she's repressed by her patriarchal Puritan structure, and she needs to be liberated by dancing naked for a goat man. This is the
join the coven of witches that butchered her baby brother. Yeah, that's very liberating, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. This is the future, girl. If Christianity wasn't so much a part of our historical culture, and this was like two completely separate representations of different religions not connected to us, any kind of natural reading would be like, yeah, maybe don't go with the baby killing naked ladies in the woods who are like under the domination of this goat man perv. Maybe don't do that. Maybe anything is better option than that. But A24.
Yeah, I do. I also just find it quite boring when interpretations of film always boil down to sexual repression, because it's like there's so much more to a human being than that. I guess our anthropology is we wouldn't view human beings as these kind of pressure cookers, and that if you can't express yourself sexually, it can only build up until it has to be expressed in some dramatic way. It's just quite a reductionistic view of human beings, I think.
Is extremely, and I think also it reduces sex, funnily enough. It makes sex something that is quite like it's not, well, because I mean, in a way it ties into the whole lack of understanding of bridal mystical language. So it's kind of like, right, so treating sex in that manner actually dehumanizes it. It doesn't make it an expression of love or intimacy or humanity. It makes it some sort of raging animalistic fire, essentially, and it's treated as such. And I'm not saying that obviously we're not mammals and there isn't an element of animal instinct involved, but at the same time, it's more than that because we're human beings made in the image and likeness of God. And I think that's really the point, and that's why like things like bridal mysticism language, they see it as, and I've run into this in so many movies, aha, this means these Christians were sexually repressed. That's why they were speaking like this. And what's weird to me is I literally ran into an interpretation like that by some person online who was saying this about Lord Brooke. And I'm just like, you do realize he was married with kids, right? He doesn't seem like he didn't seem too sexually repressed, all things considered. I mean, and it's just sort of like, but they're still like, no, he was Puritan. He had to be sexually repressed. I'm like, well, it seems like he wasn't though. Like, I don't know why you're saying, like, who's to say he didn't have a great, sex life? Like, it's just they're insistent upon it because it must be the only thing. The sex is God. So in other words, once they have to make it that, oh, he must have been saying these things because whatever, he was sexually repressed. And like, okay, but it doesn't seem like that was the case. Well, it needs to be the case because we need it to be, because we don't want to treat actually sexuality as one of many corollaries, if you will, of human desire for intimacy. And ultimately, the greatest intimacy beyond that intimacy for each other in any variety of emotional and physical ways is fundamentally intimacy with God. So it's not so much that religious devotion of that nature is a reflection of sex, but rather that human sexuality, human intimacy on all of the kind of spectrums of emotional and physical connection is a reflection of union with God.
Wow. Yeah, that's profound, actually, isn't it? And that's a more cosmic vision for sexuality.
Yeah.
My reflection on a lot of Eggers' work, including The Witch, is that it seems to have a category for supernatural evil, but no category for supernatural good. So the devil is real in The Witch. It's unclear whether God is real in The Witch.
What I would have found interesting as an alternate ending or an alternate conclusion to the story would have been that the father, when he has the prayer scene where he essentially says, he'd rather have it happen to him than to his children. He wants to save his family. If that is actually, he's taken up on that.
Right.
That he dies, but the daughter is saved.
It is my fault. I am infected with the filth of pride. Dispose of me, how thou wilt, yet redeem my children.
Because that would be very deeply tied into also the hymn that is used in the soundtrack, "Alas, and did my Savior bleed?" Which ties into the Christian, of course, concept of sacrifice and redemption. It would have been very interesting if the father, despite his past flaws and failings, had actually become a Christological figure. And that, I think, would have actually been far more narratively interesting than what they did with The Witch. Because at the end of the day, like you said, when it's just the devil and not God, well, what is the point exactly? There's no even tension, quite frankly, in the story at that point. The devil almost is God at that point. There's no undergirding reality in the world itself because God is sort of the all in all. So there's nothing that's even holding everything together. It becomes just completely nihilistic. And so without that, it could have been interesting if they had allowed that kind of meaningfulness in the story. The Christian family actually has a chance to actually live out that Christianity in a very specific context when confronted with evil.
And I guess you could see it as a lament of why does God feel silent in the face of so much evil? But you get a hint of that in Catherine's prayer, or the line when she talks about how she feels she's become Job's wife, and she fears she'll never feel the love of God in the same way again.
I had a dream once. It was when I was of Thomasin's years, that I was with Christ upon earth. And I was so ravished with his love towards me. And since Samuel disappeared, I have such a sad weakness of faith, I cannot shake it. I fear I cannot ever feel that same measure of love again.
It's kind of depicting despair in the face of evil in the midst of a Christian age. And to segue onto the Blair Witch Project, that's kind of depicting despair in the face of evil in a post-Christian age with characters, living in the 90s. In the context of America, which has been very Christianized, but maybe people leaving the church in quite large numbers, a lot of people having a Christian upbringing, but walking away from it later in life. So maybe we could segue into talking about the Blair Witch Project and how it deals with its witch in the woods. In terms of the film that was released, there's not much discussion about God. However, there is a deleted scene which appeared in a mockumentary I think the directors made about the Blair Witch. And that depicts two of the characters drawing on some kind of latent Christianity that they perhaps remember from their youth. So should we check that out? So an outtake from the found footage. Do not watch this clip until you have seen the film. Brilliant.
Do not watch this clip unless you are a Marylander and have already had the film forced on you.
Yes, indeed.
There's just so much I want to do with my life. I want to do things. I haven't done anything. This isn't anything. I haven't done anything. And I don't understand why it's happening to us. How many people will go on camping trips?
We weren't just going on a camping trip, and that's why I feel like it's all my fault.
It's not your fault anymore. It's nobody's fault. You can't have a fault for something this enormous. A human cannot be faulted for something this enormous. It's impossible. It's not your fault. I don't want you to think that. Okay? Heather?
Okay.
Look at me.
Good luck to me explaining that to Josh's mom. Good luck.
It's not your fault. We have everything documented. It's not your fault. Hey, Heather. Come here. It's not your fault, okay? It's not your fault.
It's not my fault. That's fine.
There's nothing we know about. There's nothing.
I just want to know how to get out of here. I don't care about the movie anymore now. I'm just taping so in case somebody finds it, they can find out what happened to us.
They will. They'll find out. Only God knows. God will take care of us. God will take care of us. God will take care of us. I know it.
I don't believe in God.
I know He will. I know.
I don't believe in God. What am I supposed to do? I believe in fairies and witches and
You gotta believe in God if you believe in all that crap.
Fair point. It is the question of where is God in the midst of evil. I think it's the theodicy question. And in this case, it's more dealing with God in the case of supernatural evil. But of course, there's other kind too. There's moral evil, like human beings sinning. And then there's natural evil, things like natural disasters. And in all these things, there is that same question, where is God in the midst of it? So I think this movie does touch upon that inquiry. But again, like the witch, it never really addresses a deeper reality besides, well, it seems that the witch is real. Now, one should, I would gather, be led to believe, therefore, therefore God it makes sense that there be wider things than that. But then I guess maybe the deeper question, if God exists, why does he not help us? Which is I guess, again, the great question that philosophers and theologians have asked for millennia.
Yeah, and actually I got a comment on the video I did about the Blair Witch Project a while back from someone saying that film was part of what led them to faith, actually, being confronted with that horror. They were like, oh, well, yeah, maybe if such evil exists, maybe there is also an ultimate good.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
That is pretty cool, actually.
I guess what's interesting about this comparison is in The Witch, the family are incredibly zealous Christians. Mm-hmm. That's shown to be ultimately not helpful to them. Right. Or at the very least, it's overcome by the evil. And so what else can Thomasin do but kind of submit to it? What's interesting here is these characters are not identifying as Christians, or at least that's not really motivating them for much of the movie. But here, when they're kind of flat on their backs, being confronted with the most terrifying evil, they begin to cry out to God. It doesn't ultimately follow through on that thread, as we'll see, because it ends pretty hopelessly as well.
Christianity, out of world religions, though, does have a great capacity for facing the dark. I think it's a very...
It is the light shining in the darkness, isn't it? That's kind of the whole thing.
Yes, the whole thing. It has this mixture, I think, of elements that you see in old poetry from out of the Christian world dealing with it, which is both kind of horror and romance. So there's the idea of the horror of the situation. One Gaelic Irish hymn, particularly, I remember as having a certain horrific element where Mary stands and is underneath the cross, and she is saying, Judas, James, and John, who hangs from yonder passion tree. And then Christ says back, your son, dear mother, do you not know me? Because he's like unrecognizable from how bad off he is. That always struck me with it has a horror element to it. And then there's other things, like, for example, the Old English poem from like the 1400s, Quia More Linguea, which talks about Christ, going out as to woo a maiden, which is man's soul. And there's this whole element that he is languishing for love. Those elements are joined together in the Passion, that it deals with this great depth of darkness, this truly stark darkness. I mean, my God, why have you forsaken me kind of darkness. But at the same time, it also has this great sort of romance to it. It has this great, what Tolkien called eucatastrophe to it. So I think that Christianity doesn't have an easy answer to suffering. It doesn't have an easy answer to where is God in every instant. And yet there is something contained within the very story of Christianity that gives us a glimpse of the way in which the many forms of evil will not be altogether prevented, but they are in some way necessary for this greater redemption to come through it. Various things they'll say, oh, happy fault that gained us, so great a redeemer. And things like, blessed be the hour that the apple taken was. And it's a sort of poetic way of not so much to say that the sin was good, but on the other hand, God works so wondrously even through sin and dysfunction, that in a way it contains within it blessing, even if that was not intended by the sort of the secondary, if you will, forces at work, because the first force at work is always and forever providence.
That's beautiful. And I guess these characters have been living in a society that's been meditating on that story for centuries. And so it makes sense that in a crisis like this, it would kind of bubble out of them. Now, I don't know whether the actor, because so much of this film was improvised and the actors were told bits of what they were meant to do, but a lot of the time they were just filming each other. So I don't know whether the directors told them to record this scene of them or whether they thought it up themselves, but it's certainly interesting. So where we've got to so far in The Witch, we've seen that Thomasin ultimately submits to the Witch of the Wood, whereas in the Blair Witch, they're railing against it and trying to get out to the end of the movie. Yeah. So let's see the end of the Blair Witch first, and then the end of the Witch. Oh yeah, this is pretty scary. The fact it's black and white as well.
Yeah. She does a really good job. She really, I mean. It legit looks like a basement of an old house because. Yeah. Oh.
Gosh.
Yeah, that is successfully disturbing.
Yeah, and what blew my mind about that when I first saw it is because I was just so expecting to see the witch jump out at the end or something, because I'm used to modern found footage films that have been made since, and that is probably what would happen. But it's so restrained to just show the guy facing the wall ominously, and you're like, okay, what's going on there? Has he become possessed?
And I mean, they set up for it the story that the townspeople were telling about the guy who'd murdered the children.
What he did is he took the kids down in the basement by twos, and he made one face into the corner.
Really?
And then he would kill the other one. And then when he's done with that, he'd grab the one out of the corner and kill that one too.
I guess that's the thing. There were so many layers of you weren't sure to what extent it was like the witch was causing these phenomena or people to go crazy, or whether it was, other things going on. But yeah, it was a very poignant ending.
And I think that's the kind of heart of the comparison between these two movies is, do you join the witch willingly or unwillingly? And whatever's going on at the end of the Blair Witch Project, they seem to have been captured or overcome by this evil presence. So interesting, the Blair Witch ends with someone facing away from the camera. The Witch ends with Thomasin facing towards the camera, which I wonder if that's significant. Yeah, should we just check out the bit where she joins the witches?
Yeah, this was legit disturbing as well.
Yeah. It's like the film's soundtrack kind of mingles with the words they're saying.
So curious, so where did all these chicks come from?
Yeah, because
are they Europeans as well? Because I'm just like, well, where did they get all these Euro witch chicks?
Yeah, most of the movie there seems to be one witch, the one who kind of captures the baby and that kind of thing. But then at the end here,
a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, a whole coven. And now, very different feel to the end of the Blair Witch. Like her reaction here is kind of ecstatic.
I think they're trying to tie in her thing here with Caleb's death too. That weird smile laugh. Yeah, it feels like the weird smile laugh similarity going on there.
Yeah. And I guess she did sign the contract, so she was willing in that sense, but maybe, is this her authentic reaction now, or is she possessed in that scene as well? It's kind of slightly muddy at the end of both films, isn't it? But that sense of the Blair Witch Project being unwilling and the witch being willing, I think is the key difference between them.
Maybe that could be another commentary on predestination. It's like, how much the sort of the eternal question of free will and predestination. Are you always predestined regardless of your free will, or how much does free will play a role in that? So I'm a Catholic. I believe in a form of predestination. Again, I think all Christians do on some level, because it is biblical, some type of predestination. But when it comes to Calvinists and all of those sort of branches that are closely connected with them, they sort of have a double predestination going on, where it's very much that essentially God saves and God damns and predestines some to salvation and predestines others to perdition. Whereas within the Catholic understanding, God does not predestine anyone to be damned. He does predestine those who are to be saved. Now, there's a lot of different gnarly levels to that, and a lot of like the area of mystery and different, very different ways in which even within Catholicism, people can come at that and have come at that down through the centuries.
It's a huge question, isn't it? I guess as a reformed guy, I'd say it's like entirely God's grace that saves us. But I'd also want to hold on to the fact that the world is loved. God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son. And multiple places in the Bible where he says he desires that none should perish. And yet the strong sense from the Bible that hell is a reality, that some will be lost. So reconciling those three things, God saves, the world is loved, and some are lost, is pretty mind-blowing. And I don't know if we'll know this side of eternity, I guess.
And that's why I call myself a hopeful universalist, because I have reason to hope that God wills that all men will be saved, and that by ways known to him, he will get what he wants. But I don't claim to dogmatically know. So that is the hopeful position. And so that is sort of, it's very much the Hans von Balthasar sort of viewpoint on that. But it is, I think, in these movies, there is a certain exploration of, again, that question of their fates. There's kind of an interesting line from Alfred the Great, actually, which is, I paraphrase this loosely, all Christian men acknowledge that it is providence and not fate that determines the destinies of men. Even in total, I guess you might say, disasters, which we would say these stories are kind of disasters. And yet, as a Christian, one must believe that on some level, some good can be drawn out of even the disasters. But if anything, I would say that these films do serve to at least bring up the question of these mysteries of the nature of evil.
Yeah, totally.
The fact that it exists. Yeah, the fact that it exists, the fact that there are like legitimate pitfalls of it, and certainly the danger of being too confident around it. So in the Blair Witch Project, we definitely see that sort of confidence and even flippancy about dealing with things beyond your control. And when it comes to The Witch, I mean, okay, like, I know a lot of people blame the dad for leaving the colony or whatnot there. But then again, you have various people in history who do that, and they like started other colonies and they did just fine.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of Roger Williams too. So I'm like, I feel like we're blaming the dad for just being like Roger Williams, and we tend to think he was cool in like American history. So I'm just like, maybe we're over blaming the dad on that one. But there can, of course, be a risk of splitting off of a community and going off on your own to the point where you don't have that kind of community that can actually aid you in dealing with, for example, temptation or the confronting of evil. So I think that certainly is something that can sort of be taken from it, that there is a certain peril and pitfall to that. I'm thankful that it exists to be thought-provoking. I wish it were better. I wish that it were less sexualized. I wish it was sort of less voyeuristic.
Right. Yeah.
And I would love to see more movies that actually are set during the general period, that take like very seriously the way people talked and so forth, and that kind of language. But, who knows? Maybe it could create some interest, I would hope, among people who want to see films that do at least do that kind of historical homework to a point, and maybe those who have more of a goal of getting to the heart of the history as well, and not just kind of the atmosphere.
Thanks so much for coming on the channel. It's been great to have this transatlantic chat about 2 Witch in the Woods films. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Yes, would love to. I'm really glad that we connected on social media, because I remember watching a number of your videos, and I'm just like, at first, when I was watching them, I wasn't sure if you were a Christian or not, because at first I was kind of like, he's making a lot of very interesting points, and I'm really enjoying this. And it does feel like he certainly has done like good religious research. And then at a certain point down the line, I'm like, okay, I'm pretty 90% sure that he actually is practicing Christian just from the way you're coming at it. So I was really pleased about that, though, because I think that we definitely need more Christian voices doing this kind of stuff, because there can be a tendency for Christians to be very much in kind of a very specific box and just do very specific things that are not touching the wider culture and engaging with the wider culture. So I'm very glad to see you doing what you do.
Oh, well, no, thank you. And it's been great to have you on with your expertise in the Puritans and your Maryland collections as well.